We're going on about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is a TV writer, novelist, playwright, and screenwriter who has written for Law and Order, House, Pretty Little Liars, and many other shows. None other than Mr. Matt Witten.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Welcome, Mr. Matt. I'm Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Well, you got the highlights. I started out as a playwright years ago, and then I got into novel writing, and then I got the call to come to Hollywood, so I wrote for TV for 20 years. And then lately I've been more into novel writing, still doing a little TV, but more into novel writing, and I've been writing thrillers. And this that you see on the screen, 51%, is my new book that comes out next month, and it's my first speculative thriller, so I'm quite excited about it.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Matt. Thank you. And today let's talk about the writing process of all your books. You talk about keeping a newspaper clipping about grieving mother on your bulletin board for 8 years before you knew how to write the necklace. During that time, what was happening in your subconscious?
Well, with the necklace, there was this newspaper article that, like you say, I had on my bulletin board next to my desk. And it was a story about a woman who had um, held a fundraiser in order to raise money for her to travel to North Dakota to witness the execution of the guy who had killed her daughter, her young daughter, 20 years previously. And that just struck me as just such a story, such a moving story. Um, Missing her daughter and also needing the money at this fundraiser. She managed to raise $620, and she used it to travel to North Dakota. She had health problems, so she couldn't fly, so she used it to drive there. And I thought about this for 8 years, as you say, and I thought, how can I make this into a novel? How can I make it into a book? And I kept thinking, well, it's some kind of road story about a woman on the road and the experiences she's had, and maybe she learns to somehow. I just didn't know what it was. Then one day I had coffee with my friend John Henry Davis, who's a theater director, and he said, "I know what this book is about," because I was telling him, I don't know what to do. He said, "I know what it's about." He said, "This woman is going to find out on the way to North Dakota. She's going to find out that maybe the guy who's about to be executed on Saturday at 5:30 is actually innocent. Maybe the killer is still out there." And so when John Henry said that, I said, "I don't know, it sounds too corny, it sounds Hollywood or something." But by the next morning, I knew he was right. I called him up, you were right. I wrote the book, and it's selling very well, has sold very well, and actually Leonardo DiCaprio optioned it for a movie. So we'll see if that occurs. I hope so. I wrote the screenplay for them, and um, so yeah, that's how that one happened.
Looking forward for that, Mr. Matt. Many writers feel pressure to develop ideas quickly. What gives you a patience to let stories marinate for years? And how do you distinguish between an idea that needs time and what's simply not viable?
Well, when I have an idea, I usually describe it in a sentence or a paragraph to my wife and to the people in my writing group. And I try to get a sense of if it sounds good to them, if it sounds good to me when I actually say it out loud. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, maybe I need to think some more. Then eventually, if it seems like a good idea, it might take 8 years or it might take, 2 days.
Mhm.
I'll 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 say, "Oh, I think I want to write more about that," and I'll write maybe 2 pages, single spaced, and I'll read them aloud to my wife. I'll read them aloud to my writing group, and then they'll give me feedback, and I'll think, "Oh, this sounds like could be a good idea." Then I'll write maybe 7 to 8 page single spaced outline or summary, and I'll give that to my wife in the writing group. And at that point, I'll get their feedback. I'll think about it, and if I feel it at that point that it's going to be good, then I'm ready to write. And if it still is not just connecting, if it's just not quite doing it for me, then I just put it aside. And I found that's really helpful. It used to be earlier in my career that lots of times I'd start writing a screenplay or a novel, I'd get 30 pages in, and then I'd just throw it aside. It wasn't good, it wasn't right. But now, ever since I've done this strategy of really running it by people and getting these outlines, those 3 steps I talked about, it doesn't happen anymore. When I sit down to write something, it's something that is good to be writing.
Very well said, Mr. Matt. You've said obscure news clippings often spark your Law and Order episodes. What is about that page 17 stories, the one buried, not front page, that draws you in as a writer?
Well, the thing is, I was on Law and Order for 3 years, and some stories you really have to write about. If a story is just right on page one, everybody in the world is talking about it. A famous, God forbid, school shooting, or just something that everybody is talking about. um, then it's like you have to do a Law and Order episode about it. But maybe the reason you're really doing it is because, like, you kind of have to, and you don't really have a real reason for it. There's nothing you're really trying to get across or say. You're not particularly moved by the characters. You're just doing it because it's in the news. But if you have a story that you see on page 17 that nobody is telling you, the head writer is not telling you, the network is not telling you, nobody's telling you, we've got to do a story about this because, oh my god, because nobody even saw it except you. It's on page 17. And those are the ones that the only reason you're going to do that story is if you really, really care deeply about it. So my guess is, if you think back to all the Law and Order episodes you've watched, um, the ones that were really good, that really stuck with you, that you really liked, were the ones that were not based on the biggest headline of the day, but the ones that were based on much smaller headlines.
I love Law and Order, Mr. Matt. The homeless man you met in Brooklyn become the inspiration for Sacred Journey. How do you ethically transform real people into fictional characters, and where do you draw the line between inspiration and exploitation?
This is a man named Mike, that I met on the streets of Brooklyn, a homeless man, as you say. And I walked by him for about 6 months because he was on my, way home every day. And I started talking to him. He had a dog. He was very friendly. And, I started talking to him. I thought, oh my gosh, he has a great story, and he's a great storyteller, and it's a story that should be told. And so I told him I'd like to make a one-man show out of your life. And I said he'd never been to a one-man show. He hardly ever went to plays. So I took him to see a one-man show off Broadway, starring the actor Cleavon Little. And uh, and so then he knew what I wanted to do. He understood what it was about, and he said, "Yes, I would like to do this." So I invited him over to the apartment for 2 weeks, and I actually paid him for his time. And I, wrote the play based on his boat, based on his life, using his words mostly. And and then the play was performed all over the world. And when it came to New York City, I also paid him a percentage for that. When he came to New York City, um, obviously I told him about it. He came to the opening night of the show with me, and and he was supposed to do a talk back to the audience after the show. And the first act of this particular play, it's called Sacred Journey, is about his childhood. And in his childhood, his father, I'm sorry to say, kills himself just after saying goodbye to him. He goes in the back, goodbye to Mike. He goes in the backyard and kills himself. Then his mother has a stroke, and she blames it on Mike, essentially. And then Mike's older sister, at the age of 14, becomes a sex worker. Mike gets separated from her, from his little brother. Like, all kinds of bad things happen to him. He goes to a Native American residential boarding school where the teachers beat him up if he tries to speak his native language. So anyway, Mike is sitting next to me in the audience, and he's just crying. And I feel so bad that I put him through this, that I put him through this, seeing this sad story about his life out there. And at the intermission, I talked to him, and then Act Two, actually, he's doing much better. Act Two is about his getting clean and sober and becoming a really terrific person. He's actually a very terrific person. He's a guy on the streets of Brooklyn that will like tell the kids, make sure they don't steal from the storekeepers, make sure the police don't beat up the kids. This was back in the day when nobody, if you had HIV, you didn't talk about it. He'd be the one person people would confide in. I called him like the mayor of the street. He was just an awesome guy. So anyway, the second act, he's doing better. He's becoming a really terrific person. Anyway, at the end of the show, I said to him, Mike, you don't have to do the talk back. I know it's very emotional for you seeing this play. But he said, "No, I want to do it." So he like jumped on stage, and he got all these people like telling him, raising their hands and saying they had a very multi everything audience, and so they had Native American people, they had people who were recovering drug addicts, they had people who were just economically disadvantaged, and then they had a more what you might call a traditional audience. Anyway, everybody was saying, "Oh my God, you told my life story. Thank you for doing this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much." And he came to the theater every single night of the run. He came for 6 weeks, and which was the run of the show. And he came every single night, and he just loved it. And I'm sorry to say he passed away about 5 years ago, but I think the play wound up being important in his life. It was very important to him.
Definitely a legacy for him. 51%. What behind this book of yours?
Well, it started, the idea came when I went to see a lecture by a TV executive named David Nevins. And he said that the best TV shows, he's created a lot of terrific TV shows or been involved in it, like The West Wing and ER and a bunch of shows. So he said the best shows are the ones that address people's deepest fears. So I thought about it when I was going home. And I thought, what are people's deepest fears? And the first thing that came to me was student loans. It's just the first thing that came to me. So that was sort of the whole basis for it, but it kind of widened out from there to be not just about that, but about corporations like taking over America. I mean, since I've been, following the ways of the country and politics and everything, it's like the corporations gotten more and more power, the big ones, and the federal government has gotten more and more gridlocked and confused and doesn't know what it's doing. I mean, it's just gridlocked. And so uh, and so many things have been privatized. So many things that the government used to control are privatized. So in 51%, the world, I used to say this was it took place 30 years from now, but after everything that's gone on in the past year, now I say it takes place 20 years from now. It's a world where the big six corporate syndicates own schools, roads, police departments, they even own people. And our heroes are going to essentially save the world. They don't start out to save the world. They're just homicide detectives who are just trying to solve a homicide of a poor immigrant girl, that a poor immigrant young woman that like uh, the brass doesn't care about. The New York Police Department Incorporated, it's a private organization now, just doesn't care about it all. But they feel compelled to save this person, and in the process, not expecting to, they unravel this huge homicidal conspiracy by the syndicates, and they do battle against an AI called the Red Queen, the most ruthless AI going, and kickstart a revolution. So it's really where it came from is really my fears and my hopes also for the future.
Interesting, Mr. Matt. You alternate between standing, sitting, and kneeling chair while writing. How much of this creative process is physical for you? What do you do when your body is telling you something your mind has not caught yet?
Well, I just think it's good to move. It's like even like every hour or so, I'll put on some song and just dance to it just to get my juices jangling.
Mm.
And if I sit down too long, my mind goes a little slow. If I stand up too long, my legs hurt or whatever. So I just try to keep moving a little bit. I think that's very helpful. Another thing I try to do is go for long walks. I've had many of my best ideas while going on walks or bike rides. If I turn off I love listening to podcasts, but I really do actually. But every once in a while, I'll turn them off and just try to think and just have my mind be a little bit quieter. So Yeah, I just do my best to just to keep things hopping. Yeah.
You buy really nice pens in different colors. For revising longhand, is there something about a physical act of writing ink on paper that engages different part of your brain than typing?
Yeah, a lot of things. Yeah, I do use different pens for different colors. Like sometimes, this may sound corny. I'm just going to say it or whatever. If I'm writing like a scene between women or something from a woman's point of view, I might like to use a purple or pink pen. That may. I hope that doesn't. Whatever. Anyway, that's just what I do. And if sometimes if I'm doing like really rigorous structural work, if I'm really trying to figure out should the word be this or that, if I'm at that stage of the rewrite where I'm just really focusing on like that kind of stuff, then I might use a black pen. And then if it's something else, I might use blue. Or sometimes I might just change colors just because, just keep me fresh. Um, but yeah, in terms of writing longhand, I don't write so much longhand, but I do often find that when I print something out and I'm editing, um, I just I just notice things that I don't notice when I'm at the computer. And I would say the other thing about longhand is maybe I relax a little bit more in my seat. I chill
Mhm.
a little bit more. So I might be a little freer, but for whatever reason, there's something I think a lot of writers I've known will say that there's something a little different from how you react to a page on a piece of paper to a page on the screen. So I guess I'm thinking about it now. Probably sometimes it's good for me to and anybody to or for good for me to rewrite on the screen, and sometimes it's good to print out. So any tricks I can think of, writing at different times a day might give me a different perspective. Um, Writing in a coffee shop and then sometimes writing at home. Um, so just changing it up, I think, is helpful.
Certainly, your method of expanding from one sentence to one paragraph to several pages is very structured. At what point in this process do you know you have a novel versus something better suited in screenplay or a play?
Uh, I I probably know by the time I get to by the time I get my 7-page thing, if it's better for a novel or a screenplay. Um, if it's just a couple people talking, then I think it's good for a play. I actually haven't written a play in about 12 years, but um, but I'm not opposed to it. But I haven't found something that I thought would all take place in one room or would just be people talking. Um, a screenplay and a novel. Um, Here's what I do find interesting. When I write a novel, I feel like some of them could be a screenplay and some of them could be a TV show. So, for instance, my the necklace always seemed to me like a movie. That's what it should be. My novel Killer Story, it just felt like it was the kind I could imagine it very easily as an 8 episode Netflix series. My 51% I see as a TV series. Actually, NBC hired me to co-write a TV pilot version of it. So we'll see how that goes. But so they hired me to write a TV pilot for it. So that one also I felt from the beginning should be a TV series. And I guess the difference between a TV and a movie to me is just how long you think it'll take. If it's like an hour and a half or 2 hours to tell the story, okay, it's a movie. But if it's at least 4 episodes or 6 episodes or 8 episodes, then it's TV. So I just try to feel my way through how long it would take to show that on screen. And I've done enough TV writing. I also wrote a movie that got produced. I've done enough TV and movie writing that I just have some sense of how long a story will be. One thing that's very interesting, I think, a lot like in Hollywood now, people are
Mhm.
really into producing short stories um,
Mm.
as movies. So that's become like the best intellectual property or the hottest type of intellectual property going. So, sometimes you can have a pretty short piece of fiction, but really when you flesh it out, you've got a whole movie.
You've said the first 4 pages of Breakfast of Madeleines took 4 months to get it right, but the rest took only 3 months. What were you searching for those 4 pages, and how do you know when you'd found it?
Well, it's really true. This is the first novel I ever wrote, and it starred character very much based on myself, and he had a wife who was a professor of English, like I did at the time, and two little kids, like I did at the time. And he himself was a writer. And when I wrote those first 4 pages, it was really the tone. I wanted a light, breezy tone, but I also wanted to get the exposition in and say who the guy was. And the guy, the main character, had had some tough times, so I wanted to get that across. But I also wanted to be upbeat and positive. I didn't want him to be whatever, just negative. And I wanted that positive feeling, but I wanted to have guts to it. So that 4 months that I spent was really about the tone. It's really about how upbeat is he, how positive, how negative was certain elements of his past, um, how much of his past did I even need to show in those first 4 pages. I was kind of learning how to be a novelist too. At that point, I'd been writing plays most of the time, so I was used to like just writing dialogue, and so this was a different form of writing. There's more internal thinking than you would have in a play, and there's more backstory than you would put exactly in dialogue in the same way. So that's what took me the 4 months. And then once I had the tone, I don't know when I knew it. It's just I guess I just I don't know. Maybe I just got sick of writing it. So I said, oh, it's probably good enough. Maybe somebody told me, oh, that sounds good. I don't know. But here's what I really get a kick out of. Um, and it is true, by the way. The rest of the book took me, yeah, like 3 months. Here's what I really get a kick out of. Ever since then, I've I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 times. I've read those first few pages out loud at at whatever book events, readings or signings. And every time I do, people say, um, people say, "Wow, that was so light. That was so breezy. That was so fun. I enjoyed it so much." And I just laughed at myself. I said, "You don't know what pain and torture it caused me to get that 4 pages of light and breezy." But
Mhm.
it's on Amazon, and if you so you can, I think you can read the first 4 pages for free. I don't remember if they have those free excerpts, and it's chapter one. But if you want to entertain yourself, you can look at at chapter one of Breakfast at Madeline's and read it and see if you agree it's light and breezy, and just think about all the pain I suffered. So,
So you work in writer's room for shows like Law and Order and House. How did the collaborative, high pressure environment of television shape the way you write novels alone in a coffee shop?
well, I should also say that some TV shows don't really have writers' rooms. Like a show like Law and Order and House, pretty much each episode is self-contained. So in that one, we didn't exactly have a writer's room. I would sometimes collaborate with one other writer, and certainly after we had an outline written, then we would go to the head writer and collaborate with him or get his feedback. But the shows that I was on that had more flat out writers' rooms were Pretty Little Liars and uh, a bunch of shows, The Glades, Women's Murder Club, a bunch of different shows. So the way that worked was there would be, everybody on the show would be in a room together. There'd be anywhere from, 5 to 12 of us, depending on how big the writing staff was. And we would have whiteboards all around us in the room. And and we would come up with an outline, and we would do it by we'd write a sentence for every single scene. Like we talk it out. What would be a good first scene, good second scene? What should be the last scene of Act One? What should be the last scene of Act Two? What should be the last scene of Act Three? So we talk it out, and once we thought we had something good, we'd write it up on the whiteboard. Occasionally, I worked at places where we had bulletin boards and index cards, but I'll say whiteboard for now. So we put it up on the whiteboard in a sentence, and then we keep doing that. And it would take us anywhere from probably the shortest I ever saw was 2.5 days to the longest was 2 weeks. So eventually we would have this, one sentence for every scene. And a TV show has maybe 35 to 40 scenes, 30 to 40. And so, eventually we'd have one line about each scene. And then one of the writers, it would be their job to go back to their office and write an outline, 8 to 15 page single spaced outline that would be more detailed description of the show based on that one outline, based on what was on the whiteboard. Um, So that's how it worked. And from then on, that writer would take it on. Then he'd rewrite the outline. Then he'd write the script. Then he'd rewrite the script. Then rewrite the script. But it was be that writer's show. So I guess what I've learned from that in terms of novel writing is I've learned it's really helped me with plotting. I mean, those 2.5 to 2 weeks where we would be sitting in the writers' room plotting, it really plotting out the episode. It really helped me with that, and I think it's helped make my novels pretty tight. Um, and that's the main thing. I would say I other you know basically, it was usually a lot of fun. If you had writers in the room that you enjoyed, that you liked, and the writing environment was good, the best thing is you wanted a writing environment where everybody felt free to tell their bad ideas. Uh, um, there was an expression for it, RBIs, which is a baseball term, but we used it for really bad ideas. So you had to be feel free to tell your RBIs. Um, and if you did, it was a good environment. So that was good. I like writing in coffee shops. I like writing on my own. The one thing about TV that I didn't necessarily love was unless you create the show yourself, you're writing somebody else's vision. You're writing, what someone else is passionate about, and you try to get as passionate as you can, and you really make the episode your own and fall in love with your episode, fall in love with the characters, fall in love with everything. Um, but it's a little bit more natural for me when I'm writing novels, and it's just something that has been sitting up on my bulletin board for 8 years, and I've been thinking about it for 8 years.
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Matt. And to wrap up our discussion for today, correct me if I'm wrong, you are now 68 or 69?
I'm somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. Still writing daily. What a new book coming out, 51% this year. So what do you understand about writing process now that the 18-year-old version of you and the one who got sick and promised to write could never have grasped? And what does 18-year-old still know that you are in danger of forgetting?
Let's see. So what would I tell the 18-year-old now, and what would he tell me? Is that the
Yes,
That's a really good
please.
question. I think I would probably like to tell the 18-year-old me and the 28-year-old me. I think I would
Hmm.
like to tell them, you know what? Things are going to work out. Not everything that you hope for with your writing is going to work out as well as you like. But you're going to write a lot of stuff you're proud of. You're going to you're going to make a living from it. And you're going to write stuff you're proud of, and it's going to be okay. Things are going to be okay. What could my 18-year-old self tell me now? You know, I think I'm going to tell you one thing about this is about 51%. 51% has a lot of my beliefs about the world and a lot of my thoughts about it in a way that some of my other novels were maybe a little bit more um, frivolous in a way. I'm not frivolous, but they were like less all encompassing. When
Mm.
I was a kid, I really wanted my novels to be like, or what I wrote to be big and sort of like change the world kind of thing. And then I kind of gave up on that whole idea. I'm just going to tell a fun story. 51%, I hope, is a very fun story. I think it's a very fun story. But I also think it kind of is deep. It also says a lot of things that I want to say. So if it combines those two things, I think my 18-year-old self would be very proud of me. I think he would say, good job, Matt.
Well, good job, Mr. Matt. You did a great job for entertaining us. We love what you're doing, so keep up the good work. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books, especially 51%?
Absolutely, 51%. The Kindle version is right now available for pre-order, and the print version will be available for pre-order soon. So please get it, and you can tell my 18-year-old self what you think.
Definitely. And we said you did a great job. Thank you for building your legacy to the world. Yes, people, let's support Mr. Matt Mitten because if you support him for sure, more and more 51% to rise. So, Mr. Matt, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Likewise, more to come, people. See you